By the 1100s, the majority of people in Europe were Christian, and religion touched almost every aspect of their daily lives. During an era of constant warfare and political turmoil, the Church was a stable force that provided Christians with a sense of security and religious community. The Middle Ages in Europe was named the Age of Faith because religion was at the center of people's lives and served as a unifying force in a period of disorder and instability. Major life events from baptism to death were marked by religious ceremonies presided over by the clergy. Church officials also served as teachers and record keepers. As the people's main connection to the church, members of the clergy had great influence. As the power of some church officials increased, corruption increased, and this stimulated movements for reform. Somewhat like the system of feudalism, the church established its own organization. The distribution of power was based on status. Church structure consisted of different ranks of clergy or religious officials. The Pope headed the church in Rome. All clergy, including bishops and priests, fell under his authority. Bishops supervised priests, the lowest-ranking members of the clergy. Bishops also settled disputes over church teachings and religious practices. In villages, the priest of the parish or local region was often the only contact people had with the church. Priests also preached the teachings of the church and explained the Bible, which was in Latin and to which the common people were not allowed access. They guided people on moral issues and offered assistance to the sick and needy. In the later Middle Ages, some parish priests ran schools. The priest celebrated the Mass and administered the sacraments, the sacred rites of the Church. Christians believed that participation in the sacraments would lead them to salvation, or everlasting life with God in heaven. For example, through the sacrament of baptism, people became part of the Christian community. Through confirmation, baptized people of their own will publicly acknowledged their membership in the Church. Since only the clergy could administer these rites, people depended on them, and they exercised considerable power and influence in the community in the Middle Ages. Christians across Europe also expressed their faith through devotion to saints and relics. Saints were men and women who, because of their holiness, had achieved a special position in heaven. Because of their great holiness, saints could ask for favors before the throne of God for people who prayed to them. Therefore, saints became popular figures of devotion in the Middle Ages. Of all the saints, the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, was the most highly regarded in the Middle Ages. A sign of Mary's importance is the number of churches all over Europe that were dedicated to her in the 1100s and 1200s. Emphasis on the role of saints was closely tied to the use of relics, usually the bones of saints or objects connected with their lives. Relics were considered worthy of devotion because they provided a link between the earthly world and the divine. It was believed that because they came from holy people, relics could heal people or produce other miracles. Once obtained, relics often became the prized possessions of churches and monasteries. The spread of relics in the Middle Ages contributed to a rise in the popularity of pilgrimages, or trips to holy shrines or locations that produced a spiritual benefit. Relics had an economic as well as spiritual benefit, as the influx of pilgrims often brought wealth to the town or city where the relic was located. Because the Church administered the sacraments and could deny them as a punishment, it had absolute power in religious matters. The Church developed its own body of laws, known as canon law, as well as its own courts. Canon law, based on religious teachings, governed many aspects of life, including wills, marriages, and morals. Anyone who disobeyed church law faced a range of penalties. The most severe and terrifying was excommunication. Those who were excommunicated could not receive the sacraments, which condemned them to hell for all eternity. Excommunication freed all of a king's or noble's vassals from their duties to him. A powerful nobler king who still opposed the church could face interdict, an order excluding an entire town, region, or kingdom from receiving most sacraments. Even the strongest ruler gave in rather than face the interdict, which usually caused revolts by the common people. In 1049, the first in a series of intelligent popes dedicated to promoting the power of the papacy over all of Christendom came to power. His name was Leo IX. A man of high ideals, Leo believed Europe's clergy had become corrupt, and set out on a mission to reform the church. He traveled throughout Europe, stripping bishops who failed to perform their duties of their offices and powers. Leo's reforms brought him into conflict with both political and religious leaders. Kings resented what they saw as interference with the bishops in their kingdoms. Many bishops also questioned whether the Pope had the authority to tell them how to perform their duties. Among those who rejected Leo's claims to authority was the Patriarch of Constantinople. Leo's excommunication of the Patriarch in 1054 helped lead to the division of the Christian Church into Catholic and Eastern Orthodox sects. By the end of the 11th century, popes realized the need to end the practice of lay investiture, in which kings and nobles appointed church officials. This practice led to corruption in the church, as members of the clergy often felt greater obligation to the noble lord that had given them their position than to the church. Many of the clergy appointed by noble lords neglected their spiritual duties and focused more on increasing their personal wealth and that of the lords who had appointed them. Elected Pope in 1073, Gregory VII decided to fight the practice of lay investiture. Gregory claimed that the Pope was truly God's agent on earth, and that the Pope's authority extended over all the Christian world, including its noble rulers. In 1075, Pope Gregory banned lay investiture. The Church would appoint clergy and run its own affairs. If rulers did not accept this, the Pope would excommunicate them. The young King of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor, Henry IV, rejected Gregory's claims. German kings had appointed high-ranking church officials, especially bishops, as their vassals in order to use them as their administrators. Without their support, the emperor could not maintain his power over the German nobles. In response to Gregory's decree, Henry called a meeting of the German bishops he had appointed. With their approval, the emperor sent a vicious letter to Gregory ordering him to step down from the papacy. Gregory refused and excommunicated Henry. Seeing an opportunity to gain more power at the expense of the emperor, German bishops and princes sided with the Pope. Determined to save his throne, Henry tried to win the Pope's forgiveness. In January of 1077, Henry journeyed to the Italian town of Canossa, where Pope Gregory was staying, and begged for forgiveness. The Pope was forced to concede, and a triumphant Henry rushed home to punish the nobles who had rebelled against him. Gregory's and Henry's successors ended the fight over lay investiture in 1122, when representatives from both sides met in the German city of Worms, where they reached a compromise known as the Concordat of Worms. By its terms, the Church alone could grant a bishop his ring and staff, symbols of church office, yet the emperor had the veto power to prevent the appointment of a bishop. By accepting such a compromise, the Church had basically conceded that the Pope could not exercise absolute power over Europe's rulers. As the lay investiture controversy demonstrated, some of the most intense conflict between the Church and secular rulers happened in Germany. After the Carolingian dynasty died out, the Eastern Frankish kingdom fell under the rule of powerful dukes from the region of Saxony. The strongest and most effective of these leaders was Otto I, also known as Otto the Great. In 936, Duke Otto I of Saxony took the title King of Germany. Otto copied the policies of his boyhood hero Charlemagne. He formed a close alliance with the Church. To limit the noble strength, Otto sought help from the clergy. He built up his power base by gaining the support of the bishops and heads of German monasteries. Otto dominated the Church in Germany and used his power to defeat the unruly German princes. Following in Charlemagne's footsteps, Otto also invaded Italy to help the Pope defeat a group of rebellious nobles. In 962, the Pope rewarded Otto by crowning him Emperor of the Romans, a title that had not been used since the time of Charlemagne. The German-Italian empire Otto created was the first called the Roman Empire of the German nation. It later became known as the Holy Roman Empire. Holy because the rulers were crowned by the Pope, and Roman because the rulers saw themselves as heirs to the emperors of ancient Rome. The Holy Roman Empire remained the strongest state in Europe until about 1100. Though initially successful, Otto's attempt to revive Charlemagne's empire caused trouble for future German leaders. Italian nobles resented German rule, and later popes came to fear the political power that the German emperors held over Italy. Although they became heirs of Charlemagne's legacy, Holy Roman emperors faced two major obstacles to their authority. First, although German emperors claimed authority over much of Central and Eastern Europe, as well as parts of France and Italy, the real rulers of these lands were the emperor's vassals, hundreds of nobles and church officials. Some of these nobles commanded lands and armies as strong as those of the emperors. Thus, for German emperors, the biggest challenge was to control their vassals. Another challenge for the emperors involved relations with the church, especially around the appointment of church officials, which was somewhat resolved by the Concordat of Worms. Conflict with the Church did not end with the resolution of the lay investiture controversy. In the 1100s and 1200s, German emperors became involved in further conflicts with the Pope and wasted valuable resources trying to gain control of the wealthy cities of northern Italy. This was especially the case with Frederick I. Known as Barbarossa because of his red beard, Frederick I was the first ruler to officially call his lands the Holy Roman Empire. Unlike the original Roman Empire, which had a strong centralized political system, Frederick's empire was a patchwork of feudal territories with no real central authority. Only his forceful personality and military skills enabled him to dominate the German princes. Whenever he left the country, disorder returned. Frederick did not focus on building royal power in Germany. Instead, he repeatedly invaded the rich cities of northern Italy. Frederick's brutal tactics spurred Italian merchants to unite against him. Frederick also angered the Pope, who joined with the merchants. Together, Frederick's enemies formed an alliance called the Lombard League. In 1176, the foot soldiers of the Lombard League defeated Frederick's army of mounted knights at the Battle of Legnano by using crossbows. In 1177, a humbled Frederick made peace with the Pope and returned to Germany. After he drowned in 1190 while on the Third Crusade, Frederick's empire dissolved into an array of fragmented feudal states. Unlike France and England, Germany did not create a strong national monarchy in the Middle Ages. This resulted from several factors. By spending their time feuding with the popes and fighting in Italy, the German emperors left Germany in the hands of powerful nobles, who ignored the emperors and created their own independent kingdoms. The Holy Roman Empire survived, but remained a patchwork of feudal states. This made the German monarchy weak. In the end, the German Holy Roman Emperor had no real power over either Germany or Italy. The system of German princes electing the king also weakened royal authority. This system gained strength in the 1100s and resulted in the election of weak leaders who would not threaten the power and privileges of the German nobility. As a result of these factors, Germany would not become a nation-state for another 600 years.